It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you today with the incredible artist Leila Bencharnia. We were actually working together some years ago with SAVVY Contemporary for a project that was called Ultra Sanity, which was around the elasticity of sanity and the construction of madness and the ways in which madness comes into being across societies, often near to systemic oppressions and struggles. And it feels that it is also very close to this exhibition and the work of Sara Ouhaddou and Leila, who both are near to the ancestral cosmologies, technologies, skills of their people, and are speaking from the newer generations, carrying their stories, their legacies. And I think a good place to begin would be inviting Leila to speak to us about something that she mentioned to me on the phone the other day, which was around the creation of this piece, which has been a response to the exhibition that we're immersed within, the work of Sara specifically. And we were speaking about the sound piece that was being made, and she was telling me, Kelly, I can't really explain it, but I feel that the ancestors somehow have spoken through me in order for this piece to be made. And I think it would be an incredible starting point for you to tell us about the piece that you can listen to after the talk, to hear from you about the ancestral callings, channelings that are a part of the sound work.
Yeah, I remember the conversation that you mentioned, Kelly, and actually, I don't think it's really easy to put it on words, but I truly believe that especially when it comes to diasporic experience, our ancestral, they take form again through us somehow, and when it comes to practice and spiritual practice and art practice and language and I don't know, even gut feeling sometimes, you are just guided by something that is so powerful that cannot belong just to you. So it's not just about feeling that to have any kind of real intuition, because it's really not just about you. And it will be really small to think that this has come just through our own experience and cut what was before. Actually, the piece themselves start with a couple of words about how the knowledge through the exploitation and the colonial project, it's get cut constantly, it's get removed, it's get cancelled, it take new forms, it take new shape, it take new colors. They take us always far from the beginning. And I think when I was working to this piece, extremely inspired by the research of Sara and also how Alya bring us all together, I've been questioning so much what we consider knowledge when it's come to a space and installation that they have such a large form. They go beyond the music score that it's exposed. And I constantly come back to something that actually surrounds us, which is the hand of the women, the hand of generational historical context, and sharing knowledge through recipe, through voice, through sing, through henna, through qaftan, through color, through indigo. And when I start to think, because when you sometimes have a commission work, there is this first rigid starting point of so what I'm doing now. And this feeling lived really quickly when I start to listen to the record that I have from Morocco, actually from the village of my parents, which is close to Sidi Fatma in the Urika mountain. And listening to how the drum give you this high spicy temperature through the hadra. But still, if you take a moment to listen to the lyrics, you will find yourself in a century of North Africa. How these women are able to bring joy and dance through such a sad story. And how joy is a form of resistance. And again, love and faith, etc. So it starts from looking at this matrix of knowledge that I say, okay, so the way that I can get in touch with Sara is through our women And our women for me are al-Hadra.
I'm thinking now, because of all that you mentioned, about the Zar ceremonies of North Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia. So in SAVVY, Leila and I have worked together within our radio pillar SAVVY Zar, which is honoring these legacies that have existed for centuries, where women are holding space for one another, specifically women who have somehow fallen out of rhythm psychologically, physically, and are in need of community support. And the way in which it's done is very different than Western conceptions of healing, which would send you to a doctor to have a particular medicine that maybe numbs symptoms, rather gets to the core cause of emotive pain. Within the Zar ceremonies, women are chanting, music is played, men as instrumentalists or alongside, and sometimes it's for days and nights that there are releases, some might say possession releases and confrontations of inner darkness. So I'm thinking about what you'd mentioned, which is a big part of this piece, the Hadra, and it feels like a beautiful coincidence that the Hadra you wrote is a ceremonial formation where women of the community are in a semicircle that echoes the half moon, or a circle like the moon. And today we're actually under a half moon as well. And I would love to hear from you about how you see these women playing different roles in healing across time. Also your relation to the field recordings that you'd taken while you were in the Atlas Mountains, how that came into being, and how your relation as well to these women is continually evolving.
Yeah, I mean, like how, like especially when it comes to like Islamic context, the female space like take a specific shape. I'm talking about Islam, but like I would love to say more like the Sufis roots of like North Africa in this case. How the women consult themselves in a specific space, like it's built on like healing practice, and how like we consider also like our body part of essential part of what we consider like healing practice, transmission of knowledge, etc. So what you hear in the piece is not just Hadra. Hadra, I really think it's a small part of record. It's more present in what I'm looking to, what I was observing for such a long time. But like most of the record that I use, they come from like a really female practice in the village that I come from, and not only through agriculture, for example, or weaving. And like, especially when it comes to carpet, how women, they embrace the room close one to each other in specific architecture, make it completely different, like how you observe as a carpet, like how like even like when we look at a carpet, which is like a finished product, we don't understand which all the legacy that there is behind that, like all the waiting, like also even how the material come from like an animal. There is a specific moment in the ear that you can cut. Yani, I don't remember the name, not the cotton, wool, shukran.
The fur?
Yeah. And like also how like you have to wash it and stretch it, and like how there is like a practice called al-barma, so you pass it through your finger, all of that before it became like a material that you can use for the carpet. So you can see from all this process how the interaction between the body, in this case the animal, and the earth, and the weight. Okay, how many Ramadan pass before you have like an ended carpet? So like, of course, when it comes to women fil Hadra and women in general, how they embrace the room, how they sit down like in circle, in alf mul, one in front of the other, or in small groups, it's make a lot of change. But again, when you observe at this emotional ecology, you are observing a practice of circularity, and how like from the past to the present we are holding through function with something that is way more big than us. So again, if I'm looking at the carpet, for me cannot be just a carpet. I'm really looking at all exists behind, and how this cannot be just a functional object but became like a place where I can read a story.
I think this is also a beautiful moment to enter into what you're speaking on, which is the symbols embedded within the carpets, within the textiles, and Leila's practice, which for a long time now has been critiquing Western modes of notations and scores and posing different portals into music making that can be inspired by, for example, the languages of the carpets, the hapticity of their stories and how they can be translated into sound. So I wonder if you could speak to us about this. Before our conversation today with Leila, we were speaking about Fred Moten and his speaking towards the body's knowledge and haptic knowledge beyond books, in the experience of the everyday, in the experience, then we could say also of oral storytelling. And many of these carpets, we've also spoke about this some time back, have secret codes. Sometimes women use them as a means to communicate among themselves when there were impossibilities to do so because of precarious contexts societally. So it would be beautiful to hear about this.
Yeah, I mean, I will step back for a second. Like the first time that I start to, even if I'm come from the Atlas and my whole family is from there, like, and I born and grew up there. I remember during my childhood, like not childhood, like teenagerhood, to be in Europe, how like through you know, daily life, for example, at school or like different episode in this case in Italy, I start to embrace how sometimes looking like the Western mentality can be a place where you can find superficial safety, and how this can maybe let you be really far from your beginning in terms of like how I can minimalize where I come from when it became so tricky to be here. So I remember like when I was maybe 18, really high temperature teenagerhood. I remember I came back like any summer to Morocco to stay with my family, and I end up to finish in the village of my grandma in this room full of carpet. And I thought, this is just the carpet that they usually make, or maybe because like the farm of my mom, it's really big, so sometimes room got used from other families. And actually there it was like 3 massive carpet that like my grandma heritage from her family and previous, like, so I was like in front of something like 6th generation, which was unbelievable. And she opened one for me, and she started to show me all how I can read, how much time it took her to step for the one that she made for my mom, and like how I can read how the ears go. So basically how much like water or food the animal can have, how much material can produce, and through that I can understand that summer how they could be able to move forward this carpet. And like this is completely unlock my capacity to read the carpet just as a carpet. And in that case it was like, okay, I can read through the load, like how it's neat, how that summer they work. So I can really have like a report in that case. And this is open up like my brain like never before. And slowly I end up looking at that like through the symbol, through the color. I can tell when she was like using natural color and when she started to use not natural color. So I start really to see like an entire decade of story in a carpet that from outside it's looked just like a nice pattern. And this is come back to my practice when I was like studying classic composing in Milano, and how like the music score is such a frozen space when it's practiced yourself, when they tell you, okay, nice, you can sing, but with my voice. This is what happened in the Western music score. So like the freedom that I can find like in the textile language, I never find it in music. So at such a point, my way to exist in music, it's come back true. The carpet in this case, but like the whole language present in the textile language, and how also in the colonial era, and in under impossible circumstance, color, pattern, and like how many times that shape is present, it means something that cannot get codified from the colonizer. So this is just open a way to observe things.
And in this way, so for those who have been in the other side of the space where Leila's sound installation is, there's also a visual piece which is included, and it's in white, everything entirely. So the codes on top of the white page are the same. So initially it seems almost invisible. So I wonder if you could speak to us about this decision, this desire to have it be that initially it seems imaginary, initially it seems like a blank page, and how this relates also to the mathematics, the fractals that you spoke on.
I mean, like, there is like many layers in this decision. The fact that using white on white, like white in several monotheistic and also spiritual practice, is like a color that like come from a space of protection or cleansing. It's related with salt as an element, and so the first like action, it was like, okay, because the knowledge that we are talking about like come from a specific places, I think it should be protected somehow. And then using white on white, I see of course how it's like less visible, just like experimenting like day by day. And then I start to questioning what they mean for me to be in a room, what they mean to communicate with people, even when it comes to like critical work, even when it comes to provocate and reaction, how this feeling exists like in a pre-existent feeling. So if I'm react with my practice to just like the colonial history, it means that I'm not find like a space of liberation. So I have to imagine a space when there is like a new memory coming, and as much as I start to learn and like I start to observe a carpet, just after my grandma teach me how I can see the details, tell me about like the different season, I say, so there is like an emotional factor related with interest, like geography, emotional capacity, that should guide people to observe this music score rather than be just visible or provocative through attacks. So let's create a dynamic when people can just go closer or can just get attracted, because I truly believe, and actually this is why I'm here, that like when you are guide, there is like so many other forces in the room and you should allow them to create dynamic. And I think people get attracted by some symbol, other they don't even see them. And I think that this dynamic exists by themselves and create a space for those stories to take shape that I cannot control, I don't want, actually.
So I'm wondering as well, Alya, how we're doing on timing. Just also leave some space for questions from the audience. Super, perfect. So I'm thinking also, there was a text that I was reading earlier, Sensing Sound, Singing and Listening as Vibrational Practice by Nina Sun Aidsham. And I was thinking to invoke one of her writings in order to think through further relations to the piece that you've made. So she speaks, sound in its most basic form is vibration. And this vibrational force has the power to shape spaces, bodies, and relationships. It has a tangible effect on the physical world, creating not only auditory, but also emotional and spiritual resonances. So I wonder how this also relates to your practice. And it reminds me likewise of Halim El-Dab, who in many ways translates colors, systems, codes, saw himself as someone that could hear color. And sound very often is seen as something that is intangible, that is immaterial, and yet sound is a rare medium that can teleport us to a different geography, the voice of someone who's no longer alive and present in physical space and yet is with you, immersed in a room. So it's curious that it is seen in this way when it is actually one of the most material qualities. So I would love to hear from you in relation to this.
I'm really glad that you bring Halim El-Dab to the room. Like Halim El-Dab with Benjamin Patterson and the Women of the Atlas are my most important like source of not only knowledge but also liberating you from any starting point that was before you. And this is like, I find like in the practice of Halim El-Dab so much, not only inspiration, but so much guiding and like going beyond like their own practice. Halim Eldab is an amazing like researcher and composer from Masr that unfortunately passed away 3 years ago, really recent, and he lived by himself like this massive legacy. He's connected with Zar and Textile as well, and he worked so much on like this mathematics of pattern and color code. I think like the first time that I relate with an artist from like North Africa was Halim, and I can't believe it was like 7, 8 years ago, and I couldn't believe. And I read something about like the Zar and also how he was observing at this practice and how like the invocation knowledge that exists in his practice, and he was like a teacher. So I relate so much when it comes to invocate something, like, because I really believe that sometimes what we do, it's so big that cannot come from just us. And this is like where vibration and frequency of something that was before us come in the room. So I don't think I answer, but like if you talk about Halim, you turn me so high. I don't know what to tell. But yeah, I think I relate so much when it comes to invocation in general, that like my music or how I perceive, like especially when it comes through sound installation and playing with sound choreography, so like sound in movement, it's look like that I'm just open the door for something that exists with their own energy, and this is like the public that like who hear and like what bring to the room. So yeah, I think I truly believe that my practice is just a starting point for something that I'm part of, and yeah.
Beautiful. I was wondering if you could also speak to us about the political realities of the Atlas Mountains today, which is where your family is from and your mother is still living near to there, and how you see yourself as a carrier of the current moment of their struggles still.
I mean, what I know from my own land, it's divided from like 2 swords. That is what my family tell me. Okay, and actually even that it's divided in 2, because like my grandparents and my aunties, they are still living there, and then there is the generation of my mother which broke a circle of like, let's see, also class position with like migration and bringing other forms of knowledge to the family, and then there is like my own experience as a diasporic child. So like I think that the history of North Africa, and especially when it comes to Morocco, it's used to be confused to like be just Arab rather than Amazigh or Shluh, and I think this is brings so much complexity to the conversation that maybe we don't have enough time to touch. And even when it comes to language, like it's Darija, it's Amazigh, it's Arab, it's French, or it's Darija, which is all of this together. So I think, to me, honestly, I would love to maybe respond and stay to this position as I think like that for my generation, the dream to be just in the Western culture and like do something here, it's like not only not sustainable, but not desirable. And so I feel like a lot of responsibility to take back something to my land and take care of that, bring in and be grateful of everything that I experienced traveling and studying, if we consider Western education really studying, but maybe sometimes it is, not always. So like for me, like even find like how Sara did and how many other artists do, like a way to take alive such a long history and protocol that exists in individual conversation, in WhatsApp chat, in like traveling, and let this knowledge take shape and space in any geography possibility, and give back dignity and bring culture and come back to the roots and protect the ancestor without like doing the mistake to thinking that we are all everything, but let really the muscular memory bring you back home. So for me, last 3 years, it was always more clear than like I want to spend more time in Morocco. I want to go back to a knowledge that is present in my blood, not always in my brain. So like I'm start to making music through listening practice. Come back home, serve my people and listen carefully. So I can definitely bring back with me something.
It's magical that you say this, also because a question that I was thinking of before was in relation to your father and muscle memory of your coming from a background that has his instrumentation, his work as a composer and a traditional Moroccan musician that had been in your environment. So in this way, yes, I wonder if you could tell us about your relation to the beginnings of your practice in sound, how you felt to arrive to sound as an urgent point of your life, a passion, and then a profession, and perhaps your father's influence in this, or however you want to take it.
It makes me smile if I think about my father for many, many funny ways. And yes, my father is like a traditional musician. He's just like a storyteller, extremely relate with like Gnawa culture in a really bizarre way. And like I think like that I went to different phases, like everybody, any musician or any practitioner, through considering music just certain thing or approving or not approving what we consider music. But I think like music and frequency are everywhere. So I'm not sure that it was like a clear moment when this has happened. I know when I like went to the what we can consider trap, but like sometimes it's also a bless when I decide like I want to be take serious. I want to be like a musician. So I will go to a classic composing school or like university, and we will they will consider me a musician if I graduate there. So I think was like a really, really heavy experience, like coming from a space where the music, from the corps to la terre, it's not something you can divide. And like actually find myself, like it was, musician consider music's gold, that for me is a jail. And like, I think maybe around like, 22, like I went to the academia and I started to study. And there I start my own contradiction and practice of back and forth of what make me alive and what is sustainable, what is sellable, what is not, who is a musician, who is a listener. And then like slowly with the time, because we are guide, like I deconstruct this and reach a point of just making music because it make me alive, and not just because I belong to any previous rhythm or other. For sure, my father played like a strong role also because he's relating with Gnawa music, which is like extremely spiritual. There is like a lot of spirituality beyond that, so I really have so much childhood memory of seeing my father like having a like element like fire really present, ritual around fire, singing, and following also the circle of the moon. So like, again, when you grow up like this, and then they tell you that the biggest musician in the history is Haydn, I mean, how you can deal with this, you know? And it was intense, very, very.
It is making me think about Halim El-Dab again, because so often Halim El-Dab, who was an Egyptian teacher, composer, musician, he ended up in footnotes. He ended up beneath lines where John Cage and other practitioners were the ones that were centralized. So if you could speak to us too about Ben Patterson and other influences.
Cage decided to stall his history, basically.
Yes, other influences in your work, I was thinking. Like Ben Patterson, who I'm not sure if everyone knows. Maybe you could tell us on the people who've been near to you and inspirational across time.
Yeah, I mean, like, Benjamin Patterson in the role of how I perceive like music score with Halim El-Dab was extremely present. But I'm telling you, when I went out like of like the structure of the academia, thinking that like there is, I mean, for sure you met some composer through a book that maybe they changed your life for 6 months and then they became part of your own way to exist. But I truly believe that after I like really, how can I say, like when your brain saturare la mente, like
mentally saturated.
Exactly, with like such a structural knowledge, then the real work that you want to do, it's actually unlearn because you don't have any more space for that. So again, like I'm coming back to the hand of the women, the storyteller, and like also the figure of the griot. For me, it's really important, even if it's in a region beyond like Morocco. Like I really not relate, but observe like how like a person can hold century of history and like do it like through singing also as well, and like which kind of composing can like exist in front of this gigantic wave of existence. So like really when you question the thematic of knowledge, then even perceiving a musician became something that you can really not do. Like there is women that I met like in the Atlas, that the way that they sing, the rich notation that women in the lyric Russian structure they reach after 10 years of studying. So how you can explain that if it's not true, like an ancestor guide? And how like you can talk about knowledge at that point? Cannot anymore. So like it's really changed also. You don't anymore have a desire to say this is it, this is that, but like you want to listen, embrace, and give back to the land something. And the land is the land, but could be like any space of expression.
And timing-wise, we're still good. Alya? 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes and then questions. Okay, super then. Let's see, of the many options. So, the fractals, yes, could be, and maybe it also relates to the question that I was thinking about too, which is how you often zoom in and zoom out in your compositions. For a piece that you made for 4 + 3 = 1, a show at SAVVY some years ago that was focused on ancestral cosmologies beyond the West and different conceptions of time, of space, different sciences, we could say, that don't follow linearity of time, that might see time as circular. In this work that you'd created, you were featuring natural recordings, microphones on slime, sounds from mangroves, and also other samples from various musicians. So in this work, I was curious, what are the voices that we hear alongside the female practitioners? Because you'd mentioned that there were varieties of field recordings. So if you could speak to us on this, and then of course bring back the fractals as you like.
I mean, I remember that the process of that piece, and I really think that like what really guided me in the whole process was like the field recording actually of the Mangrovia. Thanks to shout out to Double B here in the front line. Because like it's this amazing recording with like an hydrophone position for I think like some days, which is like monitoring the how mangrovia's roots move in the soil, and like the sensuality that comes through it. Like it's really like liquid, grounded, like almost red, as if it could be like a color. So I think like that I listened to this recording for like hours, I think for days, really like sexy and like beautiful. And I think that like the whole piece get guided from that first recording. And I remember it was just at the end of the pandemic, so it was like a lot of emotional isolation, and also like, you know, many of us after the pandemic, they start like a new phases when they just say, you know what, where I was until now, I didn't want to be. So it was like a moment of crisis for many of us, especially in the diasporic context, because you just are constantly in the survive mode to doing things because you have to, and you never really stop. So I think in that historical moment, many of us just stop for obvious reason and start to observe that like even the survive mode is not any longer sustainable because not bring nowhere. So I've been thinking a lot of like isolation and how find warmness in music, and that piece was like a lot of female melancholic perception, observing also, thinking about my mom so much. And I think any roots, any tree have like such a female energy because bring alive, bring oxygen, so bring back to maternity somehow. So I think the women that you see, that you hear in all the pieces are like this really feeling of eternity and also sadness somehow because of the distance. So yeah.
So then, just thinking of the question again, were there any other voices beyond the female incantations that were present in this piece, or was it very exclusively their voices, morphings, different
Yeah, I mean, it was
changes
like 1
in
hour
tone?
piece, and it was like, I think I reused also like Karl Gari, which is like this Lebanon singer, like a lyric singer, and he did like a beautiful, not, I mean, beautiful is not the right word, but it's like a really powerful piece talking about this feminicide and like talking about like how the pain can get hold from the sing, and like there is like a really 11 minutes of that record that like records there that like bring, and even if it's like through a mask, sorry, pass me the term, body will bring like this female painful history. Yeah, and I think it was like a collage of many other recording and records, and also synthesizer played for me in studio. Yeah, it was really deep.
And this work, the Ghzil that we're immersed within, what are the other presences there? That was the one, but it's good that we heard about the one past too.
Okay. Ghzal, that is also like a female practice that is present in carpet doing. So it's like things you do with your finger when you prepare the material before doing the carpet. And Ghzal, like, it's really like a texture, an emotional texture that it gets bring to the room. And there is like a lot of field recording in Morocco, especially in the Atlas, about like the wind. And then there is like a synthesizer that I'm used, that I'm in love to, that is called Continuo Mini, that actually it's crazy how it's bring the electronic body of the wind. And again, through like the circularity and sounding movement and like almost unperceptible generational share of knowledge. I slowly moved from one record to the other, and this it's based on like personal field recording in several travel in Morocco, some professional, some really like just from the car, and like electronic music. Yeah. And actually, Jacopo, that is here with us in the room, he helped me to edit the piece because it's an amazing sound engineer and friend from school in Italy. So shout out to Double G.
So now, I think 5 minutes passed. Shall we open up to questions? What are you feeling, Leila? We can also, if there's anything further on your mind, before we open up for questions. Also very glad to...
Like, I mean, a question that so many people bring up to me yesterday that maybe I can answer here, it's like how, what African fractile is, for example, and like how this Amazigh alphabet, like people, I love how when people say, this is what, I don't know from which starting point the conversation starts, like, what is this alphabet? Like, wow. And like African fractals is like a mathematic that is used in the African continent, and not only considering like the repetition of the same form as a way to occupy geographic space, even when it comes to architecture, when it comes to textile, when it comes to like tattoo, when it comes to braids. So starting from a specific shape and repeat it and repeat it and repeat and repeat until like find like another bigger one. And like this pattern of repetition is for me so close to circularity. And I start to use like African fractals and Amazigh symbol in music score composing, which can be perceived as a draw, as a way to refine myself in an electronic pattern based on repetition of frequency or tonality, and how this shape, the dimension, and the position in the score have like then a space in the piece themselves. So emotional space, like the meaning, if it's like a provocation of if wants to be in the shadow. So like African fractal is a proprial mathematic, actually really sophisticated mathematic from the continent. And like it gave me a lot of rhythm because it's bring me back to a space of control, but without control, because it's about just repetition and not holding something. And the Amazigh alphabet is more like with the emotional meaning that such a shape take in the piece themselves.
And the Amazigh language, this is one thing we haven't touched on before this conversation and yet today. How are the formulations of the notations? Is it something that is grounded in a visuality that has to do with the earth, has to do with story rather than intonation, and the way that the West, say in English, would be ABC? How are the formulations, if you could share with us?
I mean, it's like how much has like as much as like Halim al-Dab using like the type of intensity of the color themselves to like give like sonic response. The same happened to me through the shape. So there is like the Amazigh alphabet, it's more than like alphabet through letter, it's more like through words. So like can have like a really complete meaning. And also it's divided by region. It's not like the whole Amazigh, it's really, really complex. So like, for example, when it comes to free jazz or free singing or even like poetry, like the shape, the color, they take like a specific form and meaning, and like how I position again in the page, like through that shape can have like a sonic response for sure. And it can also get embraced from other artists, like they can be interpreted by other artists, a musician, if they want.
Beautiful. So now we'd be very happy to hear from the audience. Any questions, big and small, and hopefully no shyness in the room.
Leila, I was curious as you're working with the fractals and you're moving along in the music, when you're working with the fractals and moving along in the music, have you gotten to a point where you experience the singularity through these songs? And what is that? What does it feel like?
I mean, to me, like African fractals notation, it's something that I've been experienced now. It's not that preview exists through any rules. So like, for example, something that I did like in this score is like just to take one specific rhythm of repetition and position in one specific place, and that like have a cover of one sonic recording, for example, which was like the synthesizer, because that frequency, they ping-pong through each other in certain wave and rhythm that like I felt extremely connected with one pattern in particular. Actually, pattern present like in a clothing from the Sahara. So I really think it's come back through what we see in the beginning. It's not, there is not so much capacity to answer through yes or no or white and black, because there is like an emotional role present in all the composition. And it's not just emotional, but it's like we are talking like in also more deep language than just mathematics. Mathematics is just a meaning or just a relation. And it's really hard for me sometimes to answer to a more technical question, because it's so relate to the intimacy of the practice themselves when you are drawing music and feeling it, and how for you make completely sense that that shape it's related with that note. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, I was saying my question was already answered.
So definitively no more questions. What was it? Yes, absolutely. So Alya just proposed the listening to the work. And of course,
If
Leila
anyone
is
wants
around.
to like listen to it, I can start it from zero with the support of Jacopo, so like you can get like the full storytelling feeling of it. And you can also by your own self see if you relate with the music score or which kind of shape taking space in the room. Like, but like if there is something that it's really important to live outside the room, it's like the brain control of the knowledge, like to let things happen then on rather than understand them, because sometimes it's a bit tricky.
To listen with the body, that is. And Oscar has a question. Yes, of course.
Thank you. I was just wondering, from listening to what you were saying about the fractals and also the patterns in the carpet and things like this, often you find that when there are sound artists or musicians who have like a very strong kind of visual relationship, that then maybe their practice expands into visual areas. So you have, for example, a musician like Miles Davis who spoke so much about color and featured a lot of color in his work, and even in the titles, blue and green kind of blue, there are a lot of them. In his later career, he was painting and things like this. Just having such a strong relationship with patterns, with textiles, with textures, to the point where you can even create sonically from this. Do you sometimes, or do you envisage the practice kind of going in the opposite direction, whereby some of your sonic ideas or other ideas can be captured or manifested through textiles, through any kind of like physical design?
Absolutely. Through the problem publishing practice, which is also Aziza was part of, like, and it takes space in SAVVY, when we was like questioning the source of knowledge, I start to like deep digging on like traditional Moroccan weaving from all the Morocco. It took me like some years just to understand what that even mean, and I start to wave. And I think I'm extremely relate with textiles since that moment. And now sometimes I'm even wave before writing music, or writing music and then see that image position in carpet or even in fabric that you wear. So I've been a lot of questioning also like what we wear, which kind of meaning, and also in terms of spirituality and protection, how color and shape, they can like guide us or take care of it. So yeah, definitely I'm slowly also entering in this fantastic world of visual art. Very slow. Even as a designer. Even I say slow. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if anyone wants to listen to the piece, just go to the room, and in a second we will start it from zero.
And it'll be around 35 minutes. And we just want to give a gigantic thanks to Aoife, to Alya, to the entire team, to all of you for being here with us today. Feel free, of course, to speak to us. We'll be lingering around. If any questions you have and you are a bit shy, we're here. Thank you, really. Thanks so much.